Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2011 Toyota Corolla with a 1.8 liter. I believe this is a 1.8 liter engine. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the vehicle does not start. The engine cranks, but the vehicle doesn't start. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go in the vehicle so we can confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the customer's complaint, then we're gonna talk about what directions we're gonna go so we can fix whatever that's causing this engine to not start. Now, before we go in the vehicle, I wanna give a shout out to our cameraman. We got Matt today behind the camera. So Matt and I are working on this first project. This is our very first project we are working on together. So I'm excited and I'm looking forward to seeing how this project is gonna come out. And so thanks for being here, Matt. So now let's go in the vehicle so we can confirm the customer's complaint. I'm gonna start the engine. So as you can hear, the engine cranks, but it doesn't start. So it looks like the battery is weak. So I'm gonna pop the hood. So we might have to put a battery jumper on this. Let's go under the hood so we can put a battery jumper on this. The battery is weak, but I can already tell that something is wrong. We were already able to confirm the customer's complaint. Now, Matt, if you can show this battery, the battery looks new. It looks like the battery was replaced very recently. The starter looks new. It looks like someone replaced the starter not too long ago. The alternator also looks new. I'm gonna grab a battery jump box. So that's good to know. It looks like someone was here trying to fix this vehicle. They replaced the alternator, the battery, and the starter. So I got a jump box on the battery. So now I'm gonna go in the vehicle and crank the engine. So Matt, you can just be here and show the engine. I'm gonna crank the engine. Let's see if it's gonna start. So as you can hear, the engine cranks, but it doesn't start. I'm gonna try this one more time. All right, so that's customer's complaint confirmed. The engine cranks, but it doesn't start. Now, you guys have seen me deal with these type of issues here on the channel. When the engine does not start, the issue could be lack of fuel, lack of spark, or a compression issue. Now, based on how this engine sounds, I don't think we have a compression issue. The engine sounds good. We have a nice and consistent cadence of the engine, so we most likely don't have a mechanical issue. I'm gonna check fuel and spark. Now, let's come here under the hood. We're gonna stay low tech first. The other thing we could do is we can connect a scan tool to the vehicle to scan the engine computer and see if we have any trouble codes before we check for fuel and spark. Actually, let's do that. Let's go in the vehicle so we can scan the engine computer. All right, guys, so the key is on in the vehicle. I got the scan tool connected to the vehicle. So now let's scan the engine computer. So right there, the scan tool has identified the vehicle. We have a 2010 Toyota Corolla with a 1.8 liter. We're gonna click OK. Everything looks good. So let's do a code scan. This is gonna scan all the control units on the vehicle. So we're gonna do a pre-scan. So now let's wait a little bit. That's interesting. We have 0 codes in the engine computer. Do you see that, Matt? I mean, the engine doesn't start, but there are no codes. We should have had codes in the engine computer, right? Now, that could be because the battery might have died at some point. So when you have a weak battery or a dead battery, it's going to wipe out the computer's memory. So right now the scan tool is not really helpful to figure out the issue with this vehicle. So let's scroll down and see what else we have on these other control units here. Okay, so the scan tool is done scanning all these control units. We have 0 codes in the ECM, 0 code in the TCM. We got 2 codes in the ABS control unit. Okay, so I'm gonna notify the customer about these other codes. but these codes over here will not prevent the engine from starting. Okay, so right now the scan tool is useless. So let's go back to what I said. So we are done with the scan tool. Let's go back under the hood and do some tests. So we're gonna check for fuel and spark. Now, I think checking the fuel system is gonna be the easiest. So let's go under the hood and check for fuel pressure. Now, we're gonna check for spark and fuel. We're gonna start with fuel first. But before we do that, let's stay low tech first. I am going to use this. We're gonna use starting fluid. Now, you have to be careful when you use this, because if you use this wrongly, you can cause damage to the engine. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to disconnect this tube over here. We're gonna disconnect this tube. And I'm sorry guys, we are filming outside. There is a lot of glare outside here, so I hope you guys can see what we're doing. This vehicle doesn't start, so we wanna move it, but we're kind of stuck over here. So I'm gonna spray this starting fluid in this tube. Okay, so that's enough. If our issue is fuel delivery, after spraying starting fluid in this tube, the engine is gonna start. If the engine starts, that will tell us that we have a fuel delivery problem. So I'm gonna go in the vehicle and start the engine now. Let's see if it's gonna run. Okay, the battery is weak. Let me see if my battery charger. Okay, let me try again. Okay. So it's starting to get interesting because we are spraying fuel here. I mean, we're spraying starting fluid in this tube, but the engine is not starting. So we most likely don't have a fuel delivery problem. Let me do this one more time. Let's see if the engine is going to start. All right, so we sprayed starting fluid in this air inlet tube. The engine didn't start, so fuel delivery is probably not our issue. I'm saying probably because we could still have a fuel delivery problem, but if that was the only issue, after spraying this starting fluid in this tube, this engine should have started. So now we're gonna shift gears a little bit. We're gonna check for spark. So I'm gonna grab a wrench. We are going to undo one ignition coil. So I'm gonna disconnect this electrical connector. I'm gonna get this coil out of here, and then we're gonna use a spark tester so we can test this coil to see if this coil is being fired, okay? So now we're gonna check for spark. All right, so now I'm going to remove this ignition coil. We're gonna remove the first coil over here. So I'm just gonna pull the coil out. I'm gonna reconnect its electrical connector. Now, we're gonna use this spark tester to see if there's spark coming out of this coil, if this coil is working. So we're gonna connect our spark tester to the coil, and then we're going to ground this coil over here. All right, so I'm gonna go in the vehicle. Let me see if I can, okay. So I'm gonna go in the vehicle. Matt, if you can look at the spark tester there, I'm gonna crank the engine. If this coil is firing, there should be spark jumping across this gap, okay? So now I'm gonna crank the engine. Let me know if there's spark there. There's spark? So if we do have spark, then why isn't it firing? That's odd. Okay, we do have spark, so that's good. We do have spark. The fact that we have spark, this tells us that our crank sensor is good. Our spark plugs are being fired. But why isn't it starting? Now, is the throttle body just stuck, closed? Because I sprayed our starting fluid over here. It didn't start. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to disconnect the fuel supply line that supplies fuel to the fuel rail, which is down here. I don't know if Matt, you can see this line over here. I should have brought a flashlight. Let me go grab a flashlight. All right, so here is our fuel supply line. So this line over here, yeah, this is our fuel supply line. This is the line that supplies fuel to the fuel rail. I'm gonna disconnect this line off camera. I am going to connect my fuel pressure gauge to this line, and then I will bring you guys back up so we can check our fuel pressure. All right, guys, I got my adapters connected to the fuel line. So we have teed our fuel pressure gauge through the system right here. Okay, so here's our gauge. So now I'm gonna go in the vehicle and crank the engine. When I crank the engine, if we have fuel pressure, this pressure gauge should go up to about between 45 and 50 psi when I crank the engine. I believe the fuel pressure spec on this one is between 45 and 55. I didn't look it up, but we should be well over 40 psi when I crank the engine. If this gauge doesn't move, it means our fuel pump is not building pressure. So let me crank the engine and see what happens. So how's the gauge?
It's at 30.
It's at 30? Yeah. So 30 psi is lower than normal, okay? Yeah, this should go well over 30 psi. So we have a fuel pressure problem. So we have lower than normal fuel pressure. Let me crank it one more time. I'm going to bleed the pressure. So this is our problem, okay? We don't have enough fuel pressure. Let me crank it one more time. Okay. What's that?
20.
Only 20? Yeah, so this is the problem, guys. We have found the issue. The issue is low fuel pressure. Now, we're not just going to stop here. The fact that we're building fuel pressure, this tells me that our fuel pump is running, but we have to do some tests at the fuel pump to see if the pump is getting good power and good ground. We can do that by going up to the pump and doing some tests at the pump electrical connector, or let me open up this fuse box and see if we can find our fuel pump fuse. We can just do a current flow test at the fuel pump fuse. Let me see if I can find the fuel pump fuse here. Okay, I don't see a fuel pump fuse. Am I blind? Do you see a fuel pump fuse here, Matt? Nothing here says something about fuel, right? No? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Let's see if we can get access to the fuel pump. Let's go on the back of the vehicle. Let's go to the back seat. I'm going to pull the back seat up. Let's see if we have a access panel to the fuel pump. Let's go to the back of the vehicle. So I'm going to pop this seat off. So we're gonna pop it out. This seat just pops off. We're gonna grab it and pull it up. Just like that. Oh, this thing's hard. There we go. So we're gonna pop this off. Oh, check this out, Matt. So this over here is the access panel for the fuel pump. So I'm going to, it looks like we're just going to pry this up. Oh, very nice. I like when they have access panels like this, because we don't have to drop the tank to replace this pump. So let me grab a flat screwdriver. So it looks like this cover is just glued on. So we're gonna gently pry it up, just like that. Oh, very nice. Hallelujah. So here are the wires of the pump. So we have, let me disconnect the electrical connector. All right, so I'm gonna disconnect this wire. So I'm gonna press this tab and then pull the connector up. Man, this thing doesn't want to come out. There we go. Good. So we got this electrical connector disconnected. So now we need to access the wires. So we're gonna have to flip. Oops. I just stabbed myself. So we're gonna have to access these wires here. Now, just from working on a lot of these fuel pumps, when you see two big wires at the fuel pump electrical connector, the two big wires are usually the fuel pump wiring, and then the other two small wires will be the wires for the fuel level sensor. So this over here, these two wires are the wires for the fuel pump. So I believe this gray wire with the black tracer is our fuel pump power. And then this one, this looks like, what color is this? Blue? This looks blue, I think. Yeah, so this blue wire looks like our pump ground or something. Now, I didn't look at the wiring diagram of this. So these two wires will be our power and ground of the pump. So I'm gonna reconnect this electrical connector. Okay, and then I'm going to back probe these two wires. We're gonna use a test light across these two wires. We're gonna crank the engine. We have to see how bright our test light is gonna get. If our test light remains bright when we're cranking the engine, that will mean the fuel pump is getting good power and good ground, and at that point we can go ahead and condemn the pump. So I'm gonna grab my back probing tools, and then I'll bring you guys back up. All right, so now we're down to our last test. I'm going to back probe our fuel pump wiring. Okay, we're gonna carefully back probe these two wires. Okay, now we're going to use this headlight bulb to test our fuel pump circuit. So I'm gonna connect this to our back probing tools. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to crank the engine. As I crank the engine, we should see how bright this headlight bulb gets. If the headlight bulb is really bright, that will tell us that we don't have a voltage drop issue in the fuel pump circuit, and at that point we can make the call about the fuel pump. So now I'm gonna crank the engine. I want you guys to focus on the headlight bulb. So right there, as you can see, our headlight is nice and bright. Let's try this one more time. I'm gonna crank the engine. So as you can see, our headlight comes on. So we are done. We're done, guys. So I'm gonna disconnect my headlight from the pump circuit. So we're good to go. All right, guys. So we're gonna leave this right over here. We are done with our diagnosis. We know that this vehicle needs a fuel pump assembly. The fuel pump is not building enough fuel pressure. That's why this engine does not start. Okay, we did some tests, we determined the problem, so now we're good. I'm gonna end this video here. This is gonna be part one. We're probably gonna do this as a two-part video. What do you think, Matt? Should we do it a two-part video? Okay, so cameraman Matt is like nodding his head behind the camera. We're gonna do this. This is gonna be a two-part video. So I'm gonna talk to the customer. We'll get a new fuel pump, and we're gonna install it. After that, this is gonna be fixed. So I hope you like this first part. I hope you like this video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why, so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. And also, I want you guys to let me know in the comment section how you're gonna like this video, because this is the first video Matt and I are making. Matt brought his camera, he brought all his gadgets, he's filming, he's behind the camera. So this is basically the first time I'm making a video without having to worry about camera angles and stuff. So hopefully we're gonna be making more videos with Matt. Matt will be our cameraman. And yeah, let me know, guys. Let me know if Matt did a good job, okay? Let me know in the comment section. Say if the camera angles were good. and then we'll be, you know, Matt will be holding the camera for us. So stay tuned for part 2. I'm gonna leave this right over here. Thanks for watching. See you next time.